Yeah.
Oh, that's a bit demanding.
Yes. But yeah, it depends on the timetable. So if at all your day starts late, you can punch in late as well. So yeah, it's a
Okay.
bit flexible that way.
It's a government college, so we are trying to raise the bar through, these kind of forums where students get exposure to what's happening outside our environment.
Yes, it's a great initiative. I was going through the brief about the club. It's and the range of topics that has been covered so far is very nice. Yeah.
And last this year we have a theme. Last year we had an assortment, and we had in one year we had 22 symposia.
Oh, great.
Yeah, one academic year. This year, a few interruptions, so we will close with 17. Today's the 15th, then we have two more. With that, we close.
All right.
So actually, we're looking at having an international post-grad conference on the
Oh,
same theme.
oh, how nice. Yeah.
So we'll probably book you as a keynote or a chairperson for that. It'll be like the keynote is also a chairperson. It's a mentoring sort of thing.
All right.
I'll share the concept. And just formulating the whole thing, and could be in hybrid mode, so people from overseas could join online.
Yeah, yeah. That would be very interesting. Yeah.
Mm. Nancy, when are we going to start? We have 8 people.
We'll wait for 2 more minutes, ma'am.
We'll wait for 2 more minutes. Yeah. I think we can start. Nancy?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. I'm Nancy. I welcome you all for this fortnightly symposium. Today's theme is the Jcb Prize for Literature. It is awarded each year to a distinguished work of fiction by an Indian author. The cash prize of rupees 25 lakh is, to, is aimed to celebrate Indian writing and to help readers across the world to discover the best of contemporary Indian literature. Our chairperson for this evening's symposium is Mr. Chinnappa, Assistant Professor of English, St. Joseph University, Bangalore. His research work focuses on the politics of identity and history within the Kodava ethno-linguistic minority context. His interests lie in interdisciplinary area of cultural history, material culture, and cultural studies. His ongoing research focuses on documenting colonial Kodava houses and their histories. He has presented and lectured at various national and international platforms including Oxford University, UK. Previously, he worked at the Department of Postgraduate Studies and Research in English, Mangalore University, Christ University, and Jain deemed to be University, Bangalore. We are privileged to have you, sir. Hearty welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Uh, for our session, we have our paper presenter, Ms. Senyavel, second MA English, University of Madras, Chennai. Now I request sir to take over the proceedings.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Professor Srinivasan, for inviting me to chair this session. I hope to do my best in engaging with the presenter today and bringing out some interesting details. Um, I just went through the abstract by our presenter, and there are a couple of thoughts that I had about the presentation itself, uh, which is on the book Moustache by S. Hareesh. It's a English translation of a Malayalam book, and I think the approach that is being proposed today is something very unique and which blends both literary analysis and spatial studies, and also rooting it in a sense of geography, right? Uh, I'm just going to share some of my preliminary thoughts, and then the we'll open it up for the presentation. Where I come from, which is Coorg, we have a lot of folklores, and most of the folklores have a certain geographical sense, right? And I'm specifically referring to folklore called Ibbamakka Devada Paattu, which is Song of Two Gods. And it's basically about two siblings who travel across seven seas and climb up the mountains from Kannur, that is Kerala, and reach Coorg, and then settle in Coorg, right? And I think I would like to read a section from the folklore here. Um, the section that I'm reading from is from this book called Pattole Palame, which was it's a compilation of folklores um, by Nadikeri and Chinnappa. It's a colonial compilation, but translated by Boverenda, Nanjama, and Chinnappa. Uh, so, so this is a short, I'm just going to read just to give you a sense of how geography functions here. Um, so the two gods are called Akkawa and Achaya, right? So I'll just quote some sections here. Pearl like Akkawa, looking at her brother, and spoke these words, Oi, O brother, where I look, I do not see earth. If we do not get God-like status, how can we live? When she asked this, God Achaya, her elder brother, what did he say? Listen, O younger sister, I will give you fruits and take you to the earth where you will get offerings of sandal paste and flowers and godlike status. I am your brother. I am also your father. Do not be afraid. Saying these words, he gave her great courage. By then, O friend, basically they spot a eagle, and on the eagle they fly to the seashores, right? And after they fly to the seashores, basically there is this one section where they talk about specifically as to how they climb through these various passes. And this is something that we are not really conscious of. Most often what we understand is that the sense of geography came with colonial cartography. But however, here is a section where he says when they're climbing these hills, basically it says they um, they waded across the Banyani Ford, where they crossed by foot the Terate River and waded across the Punnudumbi Ford, proceeding from there to the seven passes of Pathora. They climbed by Jibba Pass, then through Koda Pass to the top of Pili Pass, where they were when crawling on their knees. So this is where I end this. But what I wanted to tell is that this the sense of geography, flora, fauna is something very interesting in regional literature, and especially in folklores. And I think today's presentation will give us a interesting glimpse into how this functions in S. Hareesh's Moustache. So. Over to the presenter. I think you can take over from here.
I hope I'm audible and visible, sir.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So, good evening. I take the greatest pleasure to be among all the dignitaries here. I thank our chairperson today, and I express my highest gratitude to Dr. Maria Preeti Srinivasan, ma'am, head of the Department of English, Queen Maris College, for always bestowing me the best of opportunities and sensitizing me to new areas in literature, as in this case, geocriticism and magical realism. S. Harish's JCB award-winning 2020 JCB award-winning novel, Moustache, written in Malayalam as Misha and translated into English by Jayashree Kalathil, um, opens with this remark about a pangolin, which is a totem-like animal in the region of Kerala. So there's this expression about pangolin being so sacred and godlike. At the same time, the novel marks the animal to be so stupid because it has this quaint habit of collecting wind-fell mangoes all through the night. Out of greed, it doesn't taste the mangoes, but heap it into one huge pile so that it could devour all the mangoes at once. But it ends up heaping the mangoes all the night, and as the day breaks, it leaves without eating nothing. So the gatherer's job is nothing but to go over and transfer all the heaps from the grounds into their baskets. And it is our central character's father, Pavian, who encounters one such pangolin as he picks it up as a toy or as a pet for his children. The pangolin speaks back to him. So animals speak in this novel, and there are so much of elements of magical realism. And the narratology gives a panoramic view to various aspects. For instance, this is obviously a novel that speaks about Dalit uprising, where the protagonist Vavachan, who gains the street name Moustache after he uh, deters to shave off his mustache after he plays the role of a police in a local play, even though he appears only for a couple of scenes and speaks merely few dialogues. His character stays in the minds of people, and he's elevated to the status of Ravan. And symbolically, in this novel, he takes this journey of an Iliad, like an Odysseus, that he goes in search of the woman he desires, named Sita, and then he tries to find route to Malaya so that he could live a life without hunger. And this novel focuses a lot about the oppression of the marginalized communities, the cruelties done to them, and whenever the casteist people wanted to establish their superiorities, how the people of the how the othered people disrobed and humiliated. All these are explained in the novel, and this novel has this complex narrative because it shifts continuously from past to the present. And the first person narrator actually tells the stories of Vavachan, the Moustache, to his child. And what is fascinating about the narratology again is that Vavachan, who happens to be a real life character, who happens to be a symbol of the struggles of a Dalit, happens to be a part, happens to blend with the folklore of his country. He happens to become a part of the legends. So that is quite interesting. But the aim of this presentation is to map the interconnectedness of land, flora, fauna, and human beings with in God's own country with respects to Hareesh's Moustache. So the novel obviously is set in Kuttanad, which is a region that comprises three districts of Kerala: Kottayam, Alappuzha, and Pathampet. So it has so many backwaters and lakes. And what is even more fascinating is that this region is known for its below sea level agricultural practices. Now, the novel happens to show a great deal of connection between the people and the flora and fauna. For instance, when the toddy tappers, who are called chovans in the novel, when they feel this thirst, it is the coconut trees that bend themselves so that these people could pick tender coconuts and quench their thirst. But when out of greed, these people start complaining, why couldn't these trees even cut open the tender coconuts for them so it will be even easier for them to drink? The trees stop bending themselves and stop offering tender coconuts to the people. Similarly, when the women start complaining, why don't the paddy present rice within the husk rather than being a raw paddy? The paddy becomes even more harder in its texture, that it has to be steamed and husked before it could be converted into rice. And then there are so many um, scientific and historical details blended with the um, with the novel, because it is fascinating to note that Arapula, which is known for its backwaters, has no crocodiles at all. But historically speaking, about 70 years ago, or in the colonial period, it is said that it is believed through many legends that the waters have been highly inhabited by crocodiles, and it was because of the arrival of the Englishman that the crocodile population was eradicated. So there's this Kariyal Sahib, who's the son of an Englishman who happens to be a preacher. And this Kariyal Sahib takes it as a mission on him to eradicate the crocodile population in the land, and he tries to rationalize it, saying that he would like to protect the duck and cattle population. But that's just an eyewash, as his true intention is that he develops an appetite for the crocodile meat, which he also believes that it would increase his masculinity. And as he starts hunting down crocodiles, more than hunting crocodiles for meat, it becomes like an addiction for him. And towards the end, what happens is that there are no other crocodiles except the last crocodile, which too is hunted by him. But what happens fascinatingly is that crocodiles and humans were coexisting. There were no incidents of a crocodile hurting a human being before that. And there are instances in the novel where there's this pavian who happens to save a crocodile trapped under a bush, and the crocodile in return offers him a free ride home. And so far, there's this mutual respect between crocodiles and human beings. But as the exploitation of crocodiles take place, uh, this Baba Sahib, he incurs the wrath of nature first, as he loses an appetite for crocodile meat. Later, he is tormented by nightmares, where he is in which he is choked by crocodile meat. And then, just like he is called Karial Sahib, the terror, the nemesis of crocodiles, again there's a rebel arising in the crocodile population too. So there are these there's this one particular crocodile which is called the Karial Sahib among the crocodiles, as much like the Karial Sahib who develops a taste for crocodile meat. This particular crocodile develops a taste for human flesh, especially women flesh. So there are instances about this particular crocodile feeding on women workers, and after preying on them, there are witnesses who have seen their jewels dangling in the bellies or belly of this crocodile. Again, there's another instance, another episode in this novel where there are a couple of turtles gathering and having a conversation, and in that conversation, there's this turtle that says, "Why can't these human beings be happy like us and be happy with these canals and drink and eat happily? Why do they go so mad about things? And uh, why do they think that they are so rational that they believe that the earth is round?" Now, this puts this novel so much in this geocritical aspect with regards to postmodernism, that multiple truths do exist. So, geocriticism is much about studying the representation of land, space, and water in literature, and it encompasses two other terminologies which are interconnected to it. One is literary geography, and the other one is literary cartography. As literary geography is more about studying the relationship between land and the text, while literary cartography is using the maps and the territories given in a particular text as a tool to attain a different perspective in interpreting a particular work. And this novel sits well in this framework of geocriticism, so that we could gain an awareness with respects to ecology, because geocriticism and ecology are complementary genres. And in the upcoming era, it is even said that cli-fi comes under this geocriticism, because uh, it also centers the climate narratives in within space, and through those climate narratives, it creates awareness against climate crisis. So the novel, it creates an awareness about coexisting with other organisms, just like multi-speciesity is a developing concept in the area of cli-fi. And this novel, it has so many allusions to the myths and legends. For instance, I heard this legend from my father, which is also repeated in this novel, that much like this Madurai Meenakshi was persuaded to go with a priest to Kerala, this Vavachan was persuaded to get onto a boat of someone. Or there's this legend of Itichan, who is a person who hates tricks, and when he finds women workers singing songs and leisurely passing times in the work fields, he would just stop the sun setting and wouldn't let it set until the women folk finish their work. And then there are these legends about these Chovans who got killed as he was tapping toddy, and his plain entertainment is to confuse the oarsmen going by that side and making them forget the ways. So the novel finds its roots in its strengths in the backwaters of Kerala, but as locating the novel spatially, it again creates an awareness about where we are heading in the contemporary times, as the novel ends with this narrator taking a trip on the lake of Vembanad, and he observes the Vembanad lake being so polluted with plastic, and then he remembers about reading a newspaper article where he has read that the bottom of the lake has a 2 meter thickness of plastic debris, and where there should be fossilized coal and clams and other aquatic animals, empty alcohol bottles and plastics. And he wonders that people would be sarcastic if at all they would be told that 70 years ago, uh, people could find crocodiles and water snakes on that Wembanad lake, and fishermen could catch mackerels and sardines without much effort just by putting their hands, as the water flow will be so uh, uh, thrusting and powerful. But all that uh, is diminishing, and the land, which is uh, which is equated with the human beings, is also observed here, as the novel ends with Vavachan dying with his mustache, his, uh, his trophy being shaven off, and on the one hand, and the author regretting the loss of the greeneries in the Kutanadu region. So the novel tries to create an ecological awareness that it is essential that we understand our interconnectedness with land and animal, and it is high time that we start erasing the mistakes done so far. I once again thank all the dignitaries who have given me this opportunity, and my special thanks to Nancy ma'am for so patiently coordinating with me, and thanks to all the professors of Queen Mary's College for always being such a great support to me. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much for that very interesting presentation. Um, I have a couple of questions. I think we can start with that, and probably all of you who are listening can also come up with some questions. Either you could write them in the chat section, or as we open up the floor for other questions, you could also unmute and show yourself and also ask the question yourself. Um, a lot of questions, really. I think I think you beautifully rendered the entire novel for us, and I think during the discussion, I think we can, in some way, dwell into some of the critical aspects that you were looking into. One thing is, I'd like to draw your attention to the book In an Antique Land by Amitav Ghosh, which is a very interesting example of how anthropology and a certain fictionalization can come together, where he explores really an archival material from a synagogue in Cairo, which connects to the port city of Mangalore, right? And in that, there is this certain uh, mingling of really history and legends and folklores, and that is and your presentation and this novel really reminded me of it. And um, so and also, I think the fact that you refer to how environment is uh, represented in the entire novel is again reminiscent of Amitav Ghosh's work in The Great Derangement itself, where he talks about how a new form of rendering of the environment is required, uh, which isn't rooted in the language of the novel, which he calls as a product of carbon intensive industrialization. I think it really makes sense that, as Harish's work is so rooted in folklore, and therefore makes space for the geography and the environment in that sense, in such interesting ways. So what I wanted to ask you was, how could you tell us all about geocriticism and how you saw it functioning within the novel itself? As to, do you see a difference in approaching landscape within this Malayalam novel as against what has been established as the methods of geocriticism?
That's a wonderful question, sir. Generally, when geocriticism comes into perspective, there's so much of a romanticizing of land when it in context. But here, the other side of the land is also represented, just like uh, the Australian earlier writers were representing the harsh side of the outback too. So here again, when the writer speaks about the lakes and the backwaters of Kutanad, on the one hand, he speaks about the the fish population and all the thickets present around the Kutanad. But on the other hand, he also speaks about the salinity in the water, and how the boatmen who happen to be the transporters of that region will find it difficult even to find a gulp of fresh water to drink. So the harshness of the land is also presented. And the another interesting fact is that the environment is shown as it is without any embellishments. So that is quite peculiar. And there's also I found that I could relate so much of the land in Harish's novel with Judith Wright's representation of land in Australian literature. So just like this crocodile taking revenge on Baba Sahib, Judith Wright has written this at Kulula, where in her poem that she claims that the native people are the heirs of the land, and those who try to conquer the land will be faced with fears. Their feet will be entangled, and their blood be thinned by fears. And again, in her Weeping Fig, she says that this scorching horizon of Australia represents its wild nature, and the fig tree, which provides shade to the current generation, represents the hard work of the pioneers who have tried to tame the land. So the merits and the demerits of the land are present. It's not mere idealization of the land. So that is interesting.
All right. I was also wondering as to how the land by itself gets represented very differently within the folk context itself. Because, in fact, in one of my classes, we were discussing about Marquez and his writing, and how there is a certain magicalness, like, which is, at least there is a certain attribution of magicalness to his writing, right? But when you are from a folk context where there are these multiple narratives of unseen natural forces, or like deities who walk around beside your house and so on, um, so much of this narrative really, the reality around which these narratives are constructed are not seen as magical, really. So, did you have any such experience, really, while encountering the folk aspects in this particular novel?
I'm sorry, sir. I did not get the last part of your question. There was.
As in the sense that, because we live in a context where there are so many folk narratives around us. Uh, does the landscape itself pronounce, like, get represented in a non-magical way? As in, do you see a folk element distinctly present there? Yeah.
Uh, yes, I do, sir. Actually, you mentioned Gabriel Marquez too. I've read his stories from Strange Pilgrims and this very old man with enormous wings. It was quite interesting that he had unconsciously written magical realism, and where he tries to assert the fact that literature is more for entertainment than for these sharp dissections. And then he roots the work on this idea that he tries to revive his Latin American folklore in his work. And similarly here too, there are instances where he speaks about the women and men of his Kutanad region witnessing all these peculiar sights every other day. So any woman going to harvest would see a toddy tapper slithering down a tree, or the paddy stokes speaking to themselves before any worker comes to the field. So all these are like everyday view for these people, and they don't make a great deal about it. So that is quite interesting, and how the folklore and the land could be related in such a way is that I find that the land itself is so connected with the folklore. So, for instance, they go to this one particular region of this Vembanadu lake, where they find that the water is not saline, and they relate that to the folklore of this Kattapulayan, which is a fusion of a mud snake and a human being. So it is this snake turning into human being, and it would swim uh, down the depths of the lake, and would find all these salinity less water. And then the job of this tricksters to get onto the boat of all these boatsmen and try to pirate them of money, and it would throw away all their goods into the water if at all they don't reciprocate its wish. And again, the Itachin. So again, the land is infested with snakes and all that. So there's obviously the threat of people getting bitten by snake, and the land hosts its own threats. And again, the folklore of Itachin comes that Itachin is someone who praying to whom that the snake venom will be drained of the body. So again, the land and the folklores are hybridized. They're fused so well.
I think that really brings me to my next question in a way, which is to do with the sensory landscape, right? As in, um, I'm borrowing here from this Canadian scholar who's into sensory studies called David Hovis. And he, in fact, talks about, stretching his analysis, we can in some way say that so much of a language is, at least a language of the novel, is so rational in the sense that it is rooted in an empirical world. And therefore, when we look at most of these narratives, be it magical or folk, the sensorium of that language is very different, as in the sensory landscape is very different. So, the phrase that you use, slithering down the tree, is for a person who's climbed a coconut tree on a monsoon day would know how hard it is. Like, it is really slippery in the sense that you wouldn't climb a coconut tree around that time. So the best way to, in fact, describe it is to slither down the tree. So, as in, that comes from a very embodied experience, really, that particular phrase in that sense. So, did you, like, would you in some way root this particular novel in that sort of an alternative sensory experience, really, which is not the language of rationality but language rooted elsewhere?
Uh, Brilliantly put by you, sir. Actually, the novel openly declares that it is against rationalism. So there are these places where actually the novel is full of legends and ghosts and spirits, and the narrator tells these stories to his child, and the child says that my teacher told me ghosts don't exist. And then the novelist just barks back, chiding the teacher, saying how dangerous it is to teach rationalism to a child. He continues that rationalism is one of the world's biggest problems that prevents imagination. Could a rationalist write poetry? Could a rationalist be a great author? So he continues that we we are always on the lookout for a better story. We are always on the lookout for novels for good story. It is not for the sake of feeding our logic or feeding our ego that is centered around rationalism, but a story that feels us that makes us feel comforted, that provides us warmth. So he's and the writer again in an interview has said that he has rooted the story around folklore because he feels an urge to tell a story. It is not about finding a logic or finding a linearity behind all these, because the novel is not at all linear. It shifts between past and present, and there are so many additions as adding to each folklore as the novel progresses. So the writer says that the central character Vavachan ironically speaks so less. He hardly has a couple of dialogues throughout the work. So he says that the urge for him is to tell a story, and a story that stands apart from rationalism, a story that merely aims at providing you a warmth, a story that aims at recording the diverse cultures of people, the tastes of people. So I find really that this novel stands apart from the ideology of rationalism.
All right. And how, like, do you see like geocriticism in a way? How do you think that it is very urban in its imagination of the landscape? Because thinking of novel as a form itself, it is pretty much a very urban. Uh, at least its roots are in a certain urban imagination. Uh, so if you think of early European novels like the Paris and the Londons and so on. So in that way, do you think that there is a gap which you might want to bridge with some sort of rootedness in our own local context that isn't there, in a sense, in geocriticism?
Mm-mm-mm. Again, sir, I was just before the meeting, I was thinking, if at all I'm about to work on geocriticism full-fledgedly, so what would be the works I pick? I thought geocriticism could also be intertwined with blue studies, which is another emerging genre these days. So there are many other works like beginning with Shakespeare. There's The Tempest, and there's Melville's Moby Dick, and there are so many other works set around oceans. So moving apart from the urban spaces, it could really be located in the other spaces like water. And then I was thinking, even geocriticism can be applied to the Forest of Arden from As You Like It, or the Mississippi River from Tom Sawyer. So that again play that river is much like a character in the novel. So again, it could go past the urban spaces. And speaking about cli-fi, there's this emerging concept of multi-species cities, and as opening with the collocation itself, it comes with cities in its terminology, and people think that it is more about having all these top-notch technologies in the highly developed city spaces. But again, multi-species cities may not be limited to city spaces. It can still be established in the rural zones too, where the key is to coexist with other beings. So geocriticism obviously can be extended to other spaces too, and I've found certain articles which applying the geocritical theory to novels set in space, like Interstellar and all that. And there's one article I found that connects this geocriticism idea to Jan Martel's Life of Pi. So there are these new developments, and these new developments are becoming over inclusive, and that's quite fascinating.
Great, thank you for that. Well, I think if there are any questions from the audience, we could take them right now.
I want to thank both of you for such a treat that you gave us. It was it's great listening to both of you. And Senyavel,
Yes.
there's a couple of words that came to my mind when you were talking about this. So he was talking about interconnectedness. So it's also about spirituality, a kind of spirituality that that we usually associate spirituality and interconnectedness with the land and indigenous studies, right?
Yeah.
So you could look at that, and then another word that came to mind is the primordial thing. That the primordial aspect, the very strong pull of the strong gravitation of the powers that are in the earth. And I also thought that you can do this Jungian study of, I don't know if I'm okay, I'm on the right track, Professor Chinnappa. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And about the Jungian reading of the landscape. So
Uh-uh.
you were talking, yeah, you were talking about Australia and the how in the outback they, because it's that vast wild. It could be the outback of Australia. It could be the Appalachian ranges, wherever, where you have these very vast stretches, or even the Antarctica. There's huge stretches of ice with no human habitation, where you feel like in the poem The Ancient Mariner, how he must have felt. Just man, and the forces of nature, where man feels so small, and man is so overwhelmed, and he's so afraid of these forces of nature. So you could there's a book by Davy, The Edge of the Sacred, where there's this white Australian who moves to central Australia, uh, and he shares all his conceived ideas about indigenous people and their spirituality, and he finds it actually works for him. It works for him, and that whole connectedness. So, and when you also spoke about the Dalit uprising in this novel, whatever little work I have done on, you know, ethnicity in Kerala, they are very conscious that the separation between Dalit and Adivasi is arbitrary. It has been made by the colonial government, and the many of the scheduled caste groups have more in common with the tribal people. They, so actually, they feel the same ethnicity. So if we see that even in with all the groups in Tamil Nadu, some many groups will be listed among caste, scheduled caste, but they will be strongly connected to forest, to this kind of these spaces, and they will also have a culture around that. So was I seem to glean a few thoughts from what you were saying, that we could um, do this Jungian reading, and we could also um, talk about connectedness to land through this narrative. And of course, it is, and he also uses the magical realism, folklore, all these things. Folklore also brought to my mind the suggestion that um, the story, when you the what comes to us through oral tradition is a true story. It's an ancient story. It has been handed down through so many generations. So that whole idea of folklore is not that it is myth, but it is really true because it has been put through the sieve of memory, of human memory, down so many generations. So is trying to human memory and whole
Yes, ma'am.
veracity in the whole thing by presenting it in that manner. That's all I have to say. And Professor Chinnappa, we can discuss that. And I also
Um,
introduce
yes, ma'am.
my
Sorry,
friend and patron of the club. He's yeah. That's also that I wanted to say that also, that he's the patron of our club, and introduce him. Thank you.
thank you, ma'am. In fact, I think that that's such important points raised by Professor Srinivasan. In fact, Tenai criticism that is to do with the Sangam landscape and how
Yeah.
literature gets like really like environmentally rooted, which is actually I think very pertinent to this particular novel itself. I think you could look up even some work on Tenai criticism, right, which is um, uh, an Indian eco-criticism is what they're calling, but I think it's very beautifully rooted in the Sangam literary landscape. So that is yet another instance of a certain rooted view towards environment and geography. Um, so yeah. Uh, uh, any questions from the audience? It would be nice to hear your thoughts as well. All right. Ma'am, do we conclude the session then? Um, Professor Srinivasan, shall we conclude the session? I think. All right then. If we don't have any more questions, Congratulations to the
couple of
presenter.
professors here, students here. Anyone wants to? I think first of all, we could take this opportunity to express our appreciation to Senyavel and our chairperson. So we need not, be daunted by the fact that we need to speak scholarly or something like that. We can always, all of us who are here, many of us are Senyavel's teachers. She studied here at Queen Mary's before moving on. So I'd be very happy to hear from all of you and hear your response to Senyavel's presentation. And also our chairperson is a young person. So would like to express our appreciation to you, Professor Chinnappa, and
Thank,
especially the
thank
research you're doing. It's very interesting, and we would be very grateful to have you as part of our community. So you
for
can
sure,
even,
ma'am.
yeah,
Thank you. Yeah,
friends, you can text your responses, your appreciation.
And thank you so much, sir, for exposing me to this Tinai criticism. Because when it comes to the Tinai division in Tamil literature, even love is dependent on what particular Tinai the people are placed. So it is a really nice area for me to look into. Thank you so much for that, sir.
thank you. I think the presentation was wonderful, really. And I'm glad I got to know about this text. I'm looking forward to reading it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Anyone wants to respond? I don't know if Dr. Rufus is driving, so he's otherwise he usually pitches in. I can see Ganesh Aditya from MCC, and yes, thank you all for coming. If there are, yes, that was wonderful. Nisha says a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, I think we can wind up, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
Nancy?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you, ma'am,
Nancy.
for having me here.
Yeah,
I think it's a great
I
initiative.
think Nancy will give us a brief vote of thanks.
Yeah.
We had an interesting session. I thank the chairperson, Mr. Chinnappa, Assistant Professor of English, St. Joseph University, Bangalore, for giving various perception on folk narrative structure, folk narrative construction, culture, Indianness, landscape, Sangam literature with several examples. A special thanks to our paper presenter, Ms. Senyavel, for giving a detailed presentation on geocritical view of Kuttanadu, its environment, mapping, space, and the relation of human with other species. Thank you, Senyavel. My heartfelt thanks to our principal. My heartfelt thanks to our principal, Dr. Uma Maheshwari ma'am, for her constant support. I thank Dr. Maria Preeti Srinivasan, Head of the Department of English, for encouraging the research scholars by providing this learning platform. A special thanks to our patrons, Dr. Rufus sir and Dr. Srilata ma'am, for their constant support. I thank all the teachers and scholars for being a part of In Tandem. Thank you all. We will meet again on 15th April with the theme Prize Winning Story, Fiction to Film. Scholars can volunteer and present papers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
See you, sir. Bye.